Welcome to another episode of Dom Picks, this time Sweet 16 edition. We got great hoops ahead of us. Without wasting time, let's jump right into my predictions. Let's start with the Florida Gators and Maryland Terps game. I'm going to be very blunt. I'm taking the Gators to win. They've been one of the better teams all season long, and in some ways, the Terps kind of fluked their way into the Sweet 16. At the end of the day, they played well in that second half to have a chance to win the game at the buzzer, but I saw a lot of things from Maryland that if they do that against Florida, the Gators are going to run them out the gym. So I will confidently stick with the Gators to advance to the Elite Eight. Texas Tech versus Arkansas. The Razorbacks are playing excellent right now. What impressed me most about this run so far by them is their defense, because their size and athleticism is giving teams trouble. And I know on the other side, Texas Tech out of both teams has been the most consistent, but it's March. We need a double-digit seed team to get to the Elite Eight. I'm going to take the Razorbacks. I like what they've been doing so far here in the tournament. They're playing with a lot of momentum right now. And most importantly, I really do think that the X factor in this game is their size and athleticism. Next, we got the Houston Cougars going up against the Purdue Boilermakers. For Houston, as I mentioned in my previous video, this program has made the tournament every year for a while now, but they haven't had the success that a lot of people would have expected from them by now. And this is yet another year where they find themselves as one of the favorites to get to the Final Four and potentially the national championship game. On the other side, you got Purdue, a team who is solid in its own right and can easily catch the Cougars off guard. This is a game where I could see the Boilermakers pulling off an upset. However, I'm going to stick with the Cougars. I believe this is their best shot at getting to the Final Four and making a big splash here in March. And Houston will be taking on the winner of this Sweet 16 matchup between Kentucky and Tennessee, two SEC rivals. These teams have met already twice, and Kentucky was able to win in both of those matchups. And we all know the saying in sports, it's hard to win 3 games straight in one season. Will that hold true in this matchup? I like the chances of Kentucky, quote-unquote, upsetting Tennessee. Like I mentioned in my reactions video, this version of Kentucky has much more experience, tournament experience at that, so that unit is going to understand that this is going to be a tougher game compared to the previous two. And on the flip side, you got Tennessee, another team who's been consistent all year long for the most part. I've also liked that as a top seed, they've handled their business in the first 2 games. This is going to be the biggest test thus far of the tournament. I'm going to take the Volunteers. That's because, again, I believe it's going to be difficult for Kentucky to win a 3rd straight game in a singular season. And the Volunteers have played so well, I believe that they will rise to the occasion and knock off a conference foe. Next, we got Auburn versus Michigan. This is going to be a very good game, I believe. You got Auburn, who is the number 1 overall seed, who I won't say have struggled in their first 2 tournament games because they ended up dominating and blowing out the lower seed. However, they did start slow in those games. And this Michigan Wolverines team is not a team you want to start off slow against because they have experience in playing in close games. It is key to note that Auburn is coming out of the SEC conference, a conference that many believe is the best conference in college basketball right now. And they played up against the Alabamas, the Kentuckys, the Ole Miss, and the Volunteers. I'm going to take Auburn to win this game. I respect Michigan, and I want to see Michigan win. I just believe that Auburn, this is their time, and they're going to capitalize on all their success this year, all the lessons that they've learned from each game, from each matchup. They're going to apply that in this game. It is going to help carry them to the Elite Eight. And that leads into the Michigan State versus Ole Miss game, where the winner of this will go up against Auburn in the Elite Eight. Man, let's start off with Ole Miss. As I mentioned, an SEC team who is battle-tested, playing in one of the most difficult conferences. I believe because they're so battle-tested, that gives them the ability to knock off a blue blood in Michigan State. Also, I want to add, in that game against Iowa State, the Rebels were very impressive in terms of their defense really gelling and getting stops and making it difficult for the Cyclones to put points on the board. And then offensively, they were in sync. They were in rhythm. Can that continue against Michigan State, a team coached by one of the greatest coaches of all time, and Tom Izzo? Tom Izzo does a great job of strategizing and creating a game plan. Not to mention, you look at that talent. They got Jace Richardson, someone who's very talented, can easily be a top pick in the NBA draft one day. As much as I need 1 or 2 more predictions to make this feel like March Madness, I'm going to lean towards Michigan State because the Spartans This feels like the year when they could get back to the Final Four. It begins with winning here in the Sweet 16 and advancing to the Elite Eight. And lastly, we have the East region. These two games are going to be elite, great hoops. First, I'm going to talk about Duke versus Arizona. I've already done my apologizing to Zona. This is a team where I mistakenly thought that they were going to fold like they always do, at least in recent history here in March. However, they proved me wrong. They've come out, they play with a lot of force. They play together, and that's the main reason why they're here in the Sweet 16. On the other side, you got Duke, who's been dominant all season long. They have shooters to space the floor out. Defensively, they got the rim protector and the 7-footer. And of course, they have the star player in Cooper Flagg, who in everyone's mind is the #1 pick in the upcoming draft. Also, important to keep in mind, this is a rematch between Arizona and Duke from earlier in the season. You don't think the Wildcats want revenge here, knocking off one of the consistent favorites to win the national championship? I think this is going to be a close game, which in my reaction video, I mentioned if Duke was in a close game, that might favor whoever they're going up against. However, I'm going to stick with Duke here. I like the talent on this team, and I believe they're going to edge out the Wildcats here in a close game and advance to the Elite Eight. And lastly, to determine who will be going up against the Blue Devils in the Elite Eight, we got Alabama versus the BYU Cougars. And credit to BYU. They have a prolific offense. I don't think a ton of people expected them to reach the Sweet 16. And right now, they have a lot of momentum. And that's key when we come into the month of March. For Bama, I predicted them to win the whole entire tournament. In their first 2 games, although they won in dominating fashion towards the end, the starts to those games were very troublesome. They allowed the lower seed to think that they had a chance. And you can't do that with this BYU team. BYU is playing with tremendous confidence right now. Right now, in their minds, they believe that they belong here and they believe that they should reach the Elite Eight. The Tide aren't careful. They could easily be upset. With all that being said, I gotta stick with my championship pick. Gimme Roll Tide. This is gonna be a shootout. Both of these offenses are elite. I don't know how much defense is going to be played, but for me to pick Bama, I believe they're going to make enough defensive plays to win this game. That's going to wrap up Dom Picks. Thanks for watching. And if you're curious to see how my bracket is unfolding, go ahead and watch this video.